Hi, I'm Kevin, and welcome to New World Carpentry Solutions. Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be building a custom Ron Paulk style workbench. In this case, what makes it custom is that it's only going to be about 2 foot by 4 foot, and all the sides and the bottom panel are all going to be 1/2 inch plywood. The first thing that we're going to do though is set up a jig that's going to allow me to rot out all the cutouts. So what I have here are 2 blocks that are going to actually be the total width or the height of each one of my cutouts. They're not changing height wise, but some of them are longer than the others. So by taking 2 blocks that are, let's say, 8 inches, my cutouts are all going to be 8 inches tall. And I can always place 1 block directly at the edge of my jig and then have one that I can move in and out if I need to make longer or shorter cutouts. It's a pretty simple jig, just a couple pocket screws and some scrap plywood or scrap hardwood, whatever you want to use for your jig. These are just some leftover 1x4 pine boards that will be perfectly fine for this jig. So in this case, I'm gonna get this assembled, and then we're gonna go into how I actually use it to make all my cutouts. And now with the jig made, we can go into the actual process of actually doing all the cutouts on each one of the parts for the workbench. I already kind of off screen cut and ripped everything to the proper sizes. But in this case, if you want a 10 inch or a 13 inch tall bench, you'll rip all your side panels to the exact width that you want it. And then you'll take your template, lay it directly on top of each one of your pieces, and then trace out your cutout. Then I'm going to come back with my drill 4 entry holes for my jigsaw, use my jigsaw to remove the majority of the waste. And then we're going to come back with some double-sided tape and actually stick our jig itself onto this onto our plywood or onto each one of our individual parts and pieces for the workbench, and then use a router to actually come back and flush trim everything. But one of the most important things that you want to do is give your jig somewhere to reference onto each one of your pieces. So I'm making a square reference line. In my case, I'm leaving about 2 inches of plywood on the top, bottom, and all the way around. So by taking a mark and making a square reference for my jig, I can then lay it directly on top of my workpiece, trace out my mark, and get everything accurate. This makes this extremely repeatable too. And again, after I get all my cutouts done on my shorter pieces, I'm going to switch to all my longer parts and then do the same thing. I will adjust my jig to make the spacing a little bit longer for the longer cutouts. But again, the process is rinse and repeat, and you guys are going to see that pretty much through the majority of this video. I'm going to show you guys how I went through and cut all the parts, and then we're going to go into the actual assembly of the Paulk style bench in the end. So important things to have: jigsaw, drill, your jig, template, or whatever you actually want to make for your cutouts, and then a pattern bit or a flush trim bit or a top or bottom bearing straight bit. So something that will allow you to kind of ride along a guide so you can make this process as repeatable and accurate as possible. You could go through and do it all with the jigsaw or circular saw, but you don't get the crisp or clean look that you get. And also, you don't want to have any jagged edges on your cutouts because you're going to be reaching your hand in and out of these all the time to grab and stow material or, tools off of your bench top. So you don't want to catch yourself with a splinter or anything else. So take your time and make sure that it comes out looking really nice. Follow the process and can't go wrong. But yeah, I'll catch you guys after the cutout process, and then we're going to get into the assembly. right, we're now finally into the assembly process. And the one downside that I can say to using 1/2 inch plywood whenever you do a Paulk style bench is that I don't quite feel confident using pocket holes on 1/2 inch plywood. So I typically just go with staples and glue, which makes a plenty rigid structure. And how I do it is, one, make sure that all your corners coming together square, and then all your pieces are cut to the exact same size. So when you set up the stop block on your miter saw or your table saw, again, you want to make sure that all your stretchers and everything else become exactly the exact same length. So when you do assemble everything, you can make a perfect square. Proper layout, and since it is only 1/2 inch plywood, make sure that you're landing dead center on each one of your shots. You don't want to have a bunch of blown out staples or nails, and staples over nails in this case, just to make sure that it has holding power, because this is only 1/2 inch plywood. And that's how I attach the bottom. For the top section, I end up using 18 gauge 2.5 inch nails, 2 inch nails and glue, and then I come back through and drill out my bench dogs. The 3/4 inch top combination with the 1/2 inch frame makes a really rigid base, or a really rigid bench itself, and it keeps it nice and lightweight, which this is going to be the one that's going to travel with me inside of my box truck. It's a new job site hauler, so I want to make sure that it's not super heavy, but also I want it to be super functional. But if you guys have enjoyed this process, please let me know down below. Leave me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.